Good afternoon, everybody. A little weird saying that. We've got a breaking reaction here before our live stream at 7:30, just to the initial drama of the courtroom. Krystal, President Donald Trump arrested and arraigned in the city of New York by the Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg. Quite a scene it was in the last couple of hours.
Yeah, we got some photos from within the courtroom. We just had the official charges and statement of facts released, and we can take you through some of those details. Just to give you some of the color here, President Trump, entered the courtroom. He didn't speak to the cameras, sort of like a grim look on his face, also a very somber expression on his face from the photos that came out from the courtroom. Apparently this arraignment, I don't really know anything about these things, but took a lot longer than they normally do. And I guess that was because the judge was spending some time admonishing specifically him, but also the prosecution about, the tenor of their commentary and to keep it under control. And apparently the prosecutor's office actually distributed some copies of some of Trump's social media posts to make a point about, asking the judge to kind of tamp down the rhetoric. No gag order, though, he's still allowed to speak about it, but just a warning to keep it under control, I guess. So.
Yes.
That was effectively what happened in the courtroom that we know of. He did, of course, enter a plea of not guilty. The charges are more or less exactly what we expected: 34 counts of falsifying business records, all with regards to, payments to Stormy Daniels and also to Karen McDougal. And also, I don't know if you guys remember the rumors of this doorman who allegedly had a story about Trump, which I think turned out apparently not to be true, but he still was named in this statement of facts. So a lot to get into there. Before Saagar's going to take you through some of the specifics that the district attorney Alvin Bragg laid out. But just a reminder, we're going to have legal analysts kind of on both sides of the debate of whether or not this should have been charged with us on our live stream tonight. We're also going to have Ryan and Emily live there on the set. Premium members can submit questions through the AMA feature, so you can ask me, Saagar, Ryan, Emily, the legal analysts, whatever. And Trump is going to be doing a press conference as well that we're going to take live. One of the bonus is there are two massively important political races happening in the country, too, that we'll be watching results from. That's in Chicago, their mayor's race, and also a state Supreme Court seat in Wisconsin, which, to be honest with you, is probably way more consequential than we're going to focus a lot on the Trump news, but that's state Supreme Court seat is incredibly, incredibly important. So make sure you join us tonight. With all of that being said, though, Saagar, give us some of the details here.
Yes, that's right. So lots to go into tonight, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, live on the Breaking Points YouTube channel. Subscribe if you have not already. So I've got the statement of facts here. We can go ahead and put it up there on the screen. I'm just going to go ahead and read a lengthy part of this so people get the full scope of what the Manhattan DA is saying. Quote, the defendant, Donald J. Trump, repeatedly and fraudulently falsified New York business records to conceal criminal conduct that hid damaging information from the voting public during the 2016 presidential election. From August of 2015 to December 2017, the defendant orchestrated a scheme with others to influence the 2016 election by identifying and purchasing negative information about him to suppress its publication and to benefit the defendant's electoral prospects, to execute the unlawful scheme that participants violated election law and made and caused false entries in the business records of various entities in New York. The participants also took steps that mischaracterized for tax purposes the true nature of the payments made in the furtherance of the scheme. One component of this scheme, at the defendant's request, a lawyer who then worked for the Trump Organization as special counsel to the defendant, Lawyer A, covertly paid $130,000 to an adult film actress.
And that Lawyer A would be Michael Cohen,
the adult film actress, as Stormy Daniels, shortly before the election to prevent her from publicizing a sexual encounter with the defendant. Lawyer A, Michael Cohen, made the $130,000 payment through a shell corporation that he set up and funded at a bank in Manhattan. This payment was illegal, and Lawyer A has since pleaded guilty to making an illegal campaign contribution and served time in prison. Further, false entries were made in New York business records to effectuate this payment, separate and apart from the New York business records used to conceal the payment. After the election, the defendant reimbursed Lawyer A for the illegal payment through a series of monthly checks, first from Donald J. Trump Revocable Trust, which is the defendant's trust, a trust created under the laws of New York, which held the Trump Organization entity assets after the president or the defendant was elected president of the United States. Then, from the defendant's bank account, each check was processed by the Trump Organization. Each check was disguised as a payment for legal services rendered in a given month of 2017 pursuant to a retainer agreement. The payment records kept and maintained by the Trump Organization were false New York business records. In truth, there was no retainer agreement. Lawyer A was not being paid for legal services rendered in 2017. The defendant caused his entity's business records to be falsified to disguise his and others' criminal conduct. That is the initial introductory statement there from the statement of facts. The takeaway goes back, Krystal, to exactly what we knew ahead of all of this circus. This all relates to the initial payments from Stormy Daniels and to Karen McDougal from Michael Cohen, and then the falsified business records by the Trump Organization. Furthermore, laid out two specific things here, which are coming clear. As we told people before, for this to be felony business records fraud or felony bookkeeping fraud colloquially, the bookkeeping fraud has to be done in the commission of another crime, basically in a cover-up. The cover-up there are two allegations. One is the federal campaign finance law, basically that Trump violated campaign finance law in the way that this payment was made. In essence, what they're saying is that the payment was only made for the 2016 presidential election, not for any personal reason for Trump, something Trump previously had claimed. Noteworthy, though, the reason why this is a novel interpretation of the law is because New York State obviously does not have jurisdiction over federal campaign finance law, and federal prosecutors explicitly declined to prosecute Trump in 2021 for this charge. So that is a novel interpretation. The second one, where they might have problems, is the tax piece of this. It was mentioned very only briefly here, but is spelled out more in the background section of the statement of facts, Krystal. They say that the defendants or the participants took steps that mischaracterized for tax purposes the true nature of the payments made in the furtherance of the scheme. Now, this is a throwaway line in the initial introduction, but may ultimately be one of the most legally consequential, because while Alvin Bragg has no jurisdiction over federal campaign finance law, he absolutely has jurisdiction over New York State tax law. So they could say that the cover-up for tax purposes was that secondary crime which was being covered up for the felony bookkeeping that was done here. I know this can get complicated and all of that. The big picture is former president of the United States arrested and indicted for the first time ever in American history. But of course, let's all get intimately familiar. You know, I've forgotten about the doorman. I truly had, but here we go again. It's been several years. I excised a lot of this from my memory.
So to your point about how the reason that this is considered a felony charge instead of a misdemeanor, which it would typically be if it was just straightforward falsifying business records, is because of that cover-up. The tax thing, we didn't know that piece was coming.
Yes.
And I do think that's really important. If you read through the statement of facts, they go to some lengths to explain the way that they structured these payments to Michael Cohen for particular tax reasons. And so that is an attempt to show that these payments in part had tax implications. And so, you know, that could end up being highly relevant here. In terms of whether or not these payments were explicitly, directly, predominantly for campaign purposes, they go through a number of times within the statement of facts, providing what they consider to be, you know, evidence that this was primarily about a campaign. I mean, two of the most important pieces are the fact that you have Michael Cohen and you have David Pecker of AMI, National Enquirer, or National Geographic, as Saagar likes to call it. Both of them, you know, pled guilty in the case of Michael Cohen. Pecker and AMI had a non-prosecution agreement with the Manhattan DA. And in their statements and admissions, they both explicitly say this was about the 2016 campaign.
Right.
There are a couple other pieces, though. Let me just pull this up that I pulled out that I thought were noteworthy in that regard. You had... on November, that's the doorman part.
Yes.
We already talked about that. Between Election Day and Inauguration Day, during the period of the defendant's transition to his role as president, the defendant met with the AMI CEO, that's David Pecker, Privately in Trump Tower in Manhattan, the defendant thanked the AMI CEO for handling the stories the Doorman Woman won, invited the AMI CEO to the inauguration. In the summer of 2017, the defendant invited the AMI CEO to the White House for a dinner to thank him for his help during the campaign. There was another piece that I thought was maybe the most significant. The defendant, that would be Trump, directed Lawyer A, that'd be Michael Cohen, to delay making the payment to Stormy Daniels as long as possible. He instructed Michael Cohen that if they could delay the payment until after the election, they could avoid paying altogether, because at that point it wouldn't matter if the story became public. And they say that's reflected in emails and text messages between and among Lawyer A and Michael Cohen, Lawyer B and the AMI editor-in-chief, that's David Pecker. Lawyer A attempted to delay making that payment as long as possible. In some ways, I thought that was maybe the most damning piece in terms of it being directly related to the campaign, because Trump's cheap ass was trying to get out of paying altogether. Clearly, you know, it wouldn't be about like marital impact if you didn't actually care once the election was over whether or not this came out. So I do think they have some pieces there to work with that may be more persuasive to a jury than, for example, this is why the John Edwards jury did not come back with a guilty verdict for him, because of this same concern that you couldn't directly prove that the payments that were made were explicitly only for the campaign.
Yes, that's right. But the problem for the prosecutors in this case is that all of this has been public information since 2018. And the feds explicitly, who have jurisdiction over this case, decided not to prosecute him both while he was president and after he was president. A lot of people forget that. In 2021, there was a decision made within the district attorney's office, within the DA's office as appointed by the feds, not to specifically go after this. So if those were materially relevant to any sort of campaign finance charge, as evident as it might be to you and I, you know, here in the public sphere, that's not actually been proven yet in a court of law.
Sure. But second, it does seem like he came as close as possible
to
being like, these payments are just for the campaign and I don't care about it otherwise, as he possibly could, which is new information. We didn't know that particular piece.
Right. So that's the second part. We should remember, too, that Michael Cohen has actually served jail time for this, and he admitted that it was an illegal campaign contribution. Again, though, that was in federal, not in state court. And so they're trying to basically prove a secondary court of which they don't have jurisdiction to back up their felony charge. The reason I'm spending so much time on this is that this is going to be key to the dismissal a case that the Trump team will make before the judge as to why it should not be held as a felony and why the entire case should be thrown out. Obviously, there was enough here for 34 separate felony counts to be indicted by the grand jury. For those who want to take a look at the grand jury piece, it's basically the indictment reads the exact same charge, 34 different times. The only change in the actual indictment are the voucher numbers maintained by the Trump organization, the checks, and then the date at which that payment was then made. So throughout all of this, I think all of us will become, once again, very familiar with the AMI, with the catch and kill schemes, with David Pecker, with Michael Cohen, with Stormy Daniels, with New York State tax law, with whether this is a novel interpretation of the law or not. And I don't know what else to say there, Krystal. It's been certainly an interesting afternoon just to take all of it in, to watch it. And the media is loving this.
I think the biggest... Oh, God, the media. Yeah. We'll talk about that some tonight, too, because there are some glorious moments. But I think probably the only piece of this that we didn't anticipate was the tax portion.
Yes.
And it does matter because, look, the falsifying business records, this is a bread and butter type of white-collar crime charge. Nothing unique about that. But that's, again, typically charged as a misdemeanor. The making it a felony charge is not totally, like, that's not unheard of. They do that, not totally infrequently. But what makes it so unusual is the fact, that it's a former president, that's number one. But number two, that you're talking about a potential federal violation is what made this, why everybody used that, like, novel application of the law. The fact that you have relevant state charges here with the tax potential, tax cover up may make their case a little bit easier. But these are the sorts of things, listen, we're just, as, educated civilians here trying to read what is available and make sense of it based on the legal analysis we're seeing out there. These are the sorts of questions I'm looking forward to putting to both of our legal analysts tonight and seeing what they have to say about it because, it certainly is an extraordinary day. Right. Certainly seeing the specter of a former president walking into a courthouse, entering a plea of not guilty. It's also just very unusual to see Trump in a setting where he is not totally calling the shots and running the show. I think that to me was maybe the most unusual or striking part about it. So there'll be a lot to chew over tonight with Ryan and Emily and our legal analysts. And as I said, don't forget a couple of really blockbuster elections that will be following this evening, as well as taking live Trump's press conference.
Yeah, I'm excited actually not only to have to talk about Trump, as annoying as it is, as I said, to revisit the freaking doorman. Thought that never would have to think about any of this literally ever again, but I guess that's part of the whole Trump thing. We will give you all the details on this that you need to know. But as you said, the Wisconsin Supreme Court is arguably going to be more influential and more important in the 2024 election than any of what we are talking about here with respect to the swing state, with respect to how the election law and all the certification, et cetera, that happens, and how the state legislature, Chicago also, look, it's one of the largest cities in the United States after the historic loss of Lori Lightfoot in the primary, and then what the runoff is, what that says about the how Democratic cities, mayors, and others are responding to the political moment, crime, et cetera, and how exactly they want to govern. Those are massively consequential, far more so, most likely, to all of our viewers' lives. So don't worry. We'll stick with the real news, too.
Yes, absolutely. And we're lucky because Ryan, of course, always follows these elections really closely. And Emily is a Wisconsinite, so she's got all the geography. We were quizzing her earlier. She's ready to go. And that one is also very relevant, as you mentioned, Saagar, for gerrymandering and also for, potential future elector schemes. And we can get into all of that. But it is directly impactful in terms of abortion. And this is it's sort of it's supposedly a non-aligned, nonpartisan race. So it's very clear which side the two candidates are on. And the more liberal of the justices that is running has been running explicitly on getting rid of this 1800s abortion ban that is currently in effect in the state. And this would flip control of the court from conservatives to liberals if she is able to prevail. So stakes are high. Voters are already saying, abortion is top of mind, at least in certain parts of the state in terms of how they are voting. So lots to dig into there as well, as I'm saying.
Tune in, 7:30 Eastern Time. We got a link to the description, or just subscribe to the YouTube channel, turn subscriptions, all that stuff on. If you want to ask questions to our legal analyst, breakingpoints.com, you can become a premium subscriber. And don't forget, by the way, if you can't catch any of this live, don't worry about it. We will still have all the audio, the reaction, etc., on our podcast feed tomorrow. So everybody enjoy. Take a couple of hours break. Krystal, I will see you soon at the studio, and let's get to work.
Yep. See everybody soon.